All right, guys. Thanks for everyone joining in today. We have a special guest today, Cristina. She is a PhD in sports psychology, has a tremendous background as a sports psychologist, which she will definitely share with you. I'm excited to kind of pick her brain a little bit and ask her some questions about how we can, deal with the mental side of sports. All right. So, Christina, why don't you start off just by, telling us about your background and, kind of where you're at today.
Yeah, so started working as a performance psychologist several years ago, and it actually started. I started working in performance psychology, and I had an interest in it because I was an athlete myself. So I competed in the Olympic Games. I was a high jumper. I competed in the '88 and '92 Olympic Games in the high jump. And then after that, I decided to go ahead and get a master's and a PhD in performance psychology because I really wanted to see what it is that gets people to perform at their best, right? And so did a lot of research with the US, Mexico, and Spain regarding that, and then started worked 3 Olympic Games as a performance psychologist, and then have gone to several World Cups and World Championships with different teams. So I have worked with a number of different sports, from soccer, track and field, obviously being that's my background, but also working with baseball, softball, lacrosse, all different sports. I worked for 10 years with the Philadelphia Union, the soccer club, and then am now the associate athletic director at Rowan University. So working with all the teams at Rowan University. So I've been really happy working with all of these different sports and different facets, and I'm just fascinated by the difference in working in a sport like diving or gymnastics, where everything has to be perfect because it is a precision sport, to working with a game like baseball, where there's you have to have a lot of tolerance for feeling like it's a game of mistakes or a game of error, and a game of, when it's actually not, because it's actually pretty precise as well. But where, if, like you said earlier, Rob, you and I were talking, and you said that 75% of the time you're not succeeding. So, they call it a game of failure, but it's not really failure, because it's so precise that you have to have like that really, really resilient mindset to keep going and to be able to stay within the game. I also have experience as a mom of an athlete, because I have 2 sons, one who's not interested in sports at all and went to the route of learning languages, and he speaks 7 languages. And I have another son who is a professional soccer player for for LAFC in LA.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean that's
Goalkeeper.
a
So
oh, the keeper. That's great.
yeah, he's a goalkeeper for
That's cool.
LAFC. So I've experienced sports as an athlete, and then as a parent, and as a performance psychologist. So
Yeah.
I have several different angles.
No, that's great. I mean, I think your
Yeah.
experience definitely speaks for itself and definitely can bring a lot to the table. I'm going to start off my first question is like, so like you mentioned the sport, like baseball is a sport of failure. Like, how do you deal with all the failure in the game of baseball? Like, you strike out, you go for three, or give up a lot of home runs. Just like, what are some ways and some tactics that you would counsel athletes to deal with that?
So I would first, for me, it's like, how do you define failure, right? Because it seems like a game of words, but if we say, oh my God, you're a failure, it's a failure, then it seems like you really are failing all the time, right? And when you look at the percentages of what you're supposed to be doing in baseball, and what's normal and what's natural, then you can kind of put it a little bit more into perspective. So it's a little bit about what is in your control, and how do you take it one step at a time, right? And in a game like baseball, it's really about focusing on what you can control. And what is it that you can control? You can't control the opponent. You can't control, like, if you're at bat, you can't control the pitcher, but you can control what you focus on. And something as simple as, you're inside, you could be having like this whole dialogue. And one of the things that I have noticed, especially working with, for example, baseball players, is that a lot of times we try to control the dialogue that's going on in your head, and rather than controlling that dialogue is actually thinking about what it is that you need to focus on. And so rather than trying to control the, oh my God, I can't miss, or I'm not going to do this, or I'm going to do that, it's actually saying, this is what I want to do, and this is what I'm going to focus on. And even if that other, conversation that you might have in your head is kind of like in the background, this is the one that you're choosing to pay attention to. And so what is it that you want to pay attention to? So and it's actually something that you need to train, because these mental skills are just like the physical skills. It's not something that you can just look at and say, oh, I read it, or I saw it, or I heard it somewhere. You actually need to train these skills in training and in competition.
That's awesome. How would you, is that like the training something that a player can do on their own? Is that something that would come from the coach? How would you train that?
So it comes from becoming aware of what you're doing, right? So I have been in several different training sessions where players are actually distracted or kind of messing around and not really paying attention. And then when they get to the competition, they actually really want to focus. And they've been training without focus for such a long time that it becomes kind of hard to now try to focus. And it's a second effort, like it's an added effort to try and focus when you're not used to it. So in training, actually being very deliberate about what you're paying attention to. It's something that coaches definitely should include in their training. Coaches should definitely be deliberate about, what mental aspect am I training when I'm training this, and what is it that I want to get out of it? Do I want to, I worked with a soccer coach, goalie coach, who at times would do a couple of things that would get the athlete frustrated, the player frustrated, because a goalie in a game might get frustrated and has to know how to get out of that. So how would you replicate that in baseball? Like, are there things that you can do in baseball where, you might get frustrated because you keep striking out? Okay, so what's going to be your mindset coming into the next time that you're at bat? How are you going to train that?
That's cool. That's awesome. So if you're, let's say you're on the bench and you see a player who just, maybe he just chucked his helmet, threw his bat. He's obviously upset with himself for, letting the team down. How do you pick him back up? What do you say? Do you not say anything? Is it just a pat on the butt? Like, what do you do for someone else that you see is upset and frustrated?
So if I try to answer that and I try to give you one answer for just the people that are in this call, you all would need something different.
True.
So the reality is we would have, I don't know, like Matt might need some space, let's say, and he might, and I don't know you, Matt, but I'm just using, I saw your name, so I'm like, so Matt might need like a little bit of space, so he comes in and throws throws a helmet, throws a bat, and I know Matt pretty well. I know to, like, take 2 steps back and let him have his space for a little bit. If I see that he continues to do that and that he stays in that zone when we keep moving on, and he's going to go out to the next inning, let's say, in that mindset, I might interfere and say something. I might say something like, let it go, and I mean, you use different techniques, right? You use things like let it go, flush it, next play, that's done. Baseball is fascinating to me because it's one of the sports, it's the only sport that actually puts your error on a billboard. Like if you make a mistake in baseball, it's like error.
Yep. Yeah.
this inning,
Everyone knows
this,
about it.
and
Yeah.
everybody knows about it, and it's
Yeah.
there. And then you're trying to let go of it, and it's there,
Yeah.
And
No, it's true.
so
It's
it
true.
actually takes like a special, that's why I'm saying that baseball players have to be very resilient, but you learn to be resilient. There might be another player who doesn't need the space, who just needs somebody to tell him right away, hey, let it go, it's fine, let's
Yeah.
move on, or that just needs some, so you really need to know your players to know what it is that they need.
Hmm.
And you need to know yourself. I mean, do you need space, or do you need somebody to come in and come at you, come and talk to you? So it's really going to depend on what you need.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, I think it's the same thing from a training side. Everything's very individualized, and I think as a teammate, you have to know your teammates and know, what they like and what they don't like. I think that's a tremendous answer. Um, how everyone talks a lot about in baseball, like, like visualizing and like mentally preparing to see the batter or see the pitch or hit the home run. In your experience, is that successful? Is there any research that might back that up? So just speak on just kind of the visualization, pre-pitch, pre-game aspect of that.
So there's a lot of research on being able to visualize and to be able to see it, and there's been a ton of research done from both sides too, whether can you visualize yourself. When you visualize yourself, do you visualize yourself like watching a movie? It's almost like watching a video of yourself. Or do you visualize like internally, like you feel the grip of the bat, and you're like thinking about, and you see the ball, and you see the pitcher, and right. And so this is really going to depend on how, and both of them, I mean, there's like this whole discussion about which one is best and like which one is more helpful. And the reality is they're both helpful. They can also both be harmful. Why am I saying this? Because if you start visualizing and you're not used to it, and you start let's say somebody told you that you should visualize like for a game, right? But if you've never done this in training, and then at a game you try to visualize, you might start visualizing yourself striking out or dropping the ball. Has this ever happened to anybody? Because I see some like smiley faces kind of like
I'm
going like,
sure.
yeah.
Uh,
Right. And so
yeah.
now, and I can tell you this because like I was a high jumper, so track and field, right? And the high jump, you try to get over the bar, right? And I had a couple of times when I was visualizing myself right before I jumped, and I visualized myself knocking the bar down, and I was like, oh my God, I don't want to do that. So if you're visualizing yourself striking out, you're like, I don't want to do
Right.
that. Right. And so the idea here is more than, if visualizing is something that is easy for you and you feel comfortable doing it, then I think that you should incorporate it and you should do it. It's more of a routine, like what are the routines that work for you, and what are things that you can do that help you prepare for when you go to bat or when you're out on the field, right? So what are some of the things that help? And having a routine and not a ritual, because this is a difference that I see with, and in baseball, you guys are quite famous for having rituals more than routines, where, you pass the ball from first to second and from
Hmm.
second to third, and it has to go in this way and in this
Yep.
sequence. And if somebody drops it,
Yep.
it's like,
Pitchers
so
don't step on the line. They walk out. They
yeah.
don't step on the line.
And I'm not here to like, take, like,
No, I know. We're playing. I
there's
know.
there's certain rituals that that people have, and I'm not going to mess with them, but the reality is, if you have a certain way of preparing, where routines are something that you can change and manage according to what you need. So in this moment, this is what I need. I need to calm myself down. So one of the things that I do to calm down is I take like a couple of deep breaths. I tell myself, let go. I focus on the ball, and then I throw, or I do this or that, right? Or I grab my bat in a certain way. All of a sudden you start having people who, if they don't tap the bat 3 times, or if they don't move a certain way, they feel like they're not going to be able to perform well. Well, now that's becoming something that's going to hinder your performance, because if for any reason you can't do that, then you're not going to be able to. And that's not going to be something that you want. So that's why I say the difference between rituals and routines. You want to have a routine that actually helps you perform better. And a routine needs to be flexible. A ritual is usually like, I'd never step on the line, I mean, like, that's like, so
Yeah.
you need to make sure that you're flexible with that.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. Um, uh, I think you mentioned a little bit about like stress. Like, how would you help someone manage the stress of competition or of just the sport of baseball? Like, is there something that they can do on their own at home during the game? You mentioned a couple breaths. I know a lot of pitchers do that before every pitch. Just a quick inhale, exhale before they throw. What are some other techniques that'll help kind of manage just the high stressors of competition?
So yeah, there's different programs that you create, right? But there's different things that you can do yourself to, number one is understand that stress and competition is actually a good thing, because a lot of times we feel like, oh my god, I shouldn't be stressed. When you're stressed about a competition or you feel a little bit anxious, and I had these kids talking to me about feeling anxious, and since I have two young ones here, I'm going to talk to them a little bit about how, what's the difference between when you feel, and I'm going to ask Carter and who's our other young participant,
Jackson.
Jax. So Jackson and Carter. So if you feel butterflies, do you get that feeling like, where you have like a little bit of butterflies in your stomach? How does that feel? Can you compete well with that?
Nah, it's kind of harder to compete with that because I'm not uncomfortable. It's like hard to do it.
Okay. Carter, how about you?
Sometimes I can. It depends on like what situations I'm in.
Okay.
Like what spot am I hitting in? What spot am I? What position I'm playing?
Okay. And so sometimes when I ask kids about this, I've had kids who say butterflies are fine. I just don't like it when I feel bats in my stomach. And so that's the difference between feeling like a little bit of, like when I feel a little bit of nerves, it's fine because it kind of gets me focused and it helps me feel like the excitement of the competition. So when it's excitement, I'm good with it. When it's like I'm uncomfortable, like I'm breathing too fast, when the signs that you have of too much stress, when it's that, then I'm really uncomfortable and I don't like it, right? And so it's actually recognizing what is it that you're feeling, because a little bit of nerves is actually a good thing because it can actually help you focus better, right? It especially for baseball, like, well, especially for baseball, because when you're out on the field, you want to have like the whole, you don't want to have like that tunnel vision. But for certain things, you do want to have like that very specific focus in baseball, and then you want it to broaden. When you are very stressed, your vision narrows quite a bit, so you can't see as well, right? And so that's why you want to make sure that you're able to manage that stress. So yes, there's techniques like breathing techniques, and there's breathing techniques as simple as you breathe in and you count to 5, and then as you're exhaling you count to 6. And so you do that, and you can do that at any point, right? But again, you have to practice, because if in a competition, if in a game you try to do that for the first time, one of the things that could happen is that you start feeling like you're either not getting enough breath or you're hyperventilating. So you want to make sure that you practice this in training, so you can actually do this in training. But you're with strength and conditioning. A lot of the times, the things that you focus on when you're doing an exercise with weights is that you tell people to keep breathing. Because I know, like, people who are, bench pressing, they start going like, and they're not breathing, and you're like, you actually need to breathe, and that will help you actually with the weight. And so it's actually training people to make sure that they are aware of how they're breathing.
Oh, that's great. That's awesome. Let me see, what was my next one? So we talked briefly about it, but like, I'd like to expand a little more, just like the mindset of like being in a game and being in practice. I think a lot of people have the concept of like practice being just like lackadaisical. Maybe some people take it seriously and some don't. And then when it comes to the game time, it's like, all right, we got to turn it on. Like we have to mentally be ready. Like it's a big game. So just talk about like practice and game mindset and how that might be similar or different.
So if I were to say that every training session, every practice needs to be like a game, would that be realistic or no?
No.
No. I mean, like, it's not realistic. And the stress that you feel and the importance of the game and that it's not going to be the same. So actually saying it has to be the same is illogical, right? So you actually want to say there's going to be times in practice where we're going to be able to focus a little bit more. So one of the things that I work with coaches quite a bit is saying things like, okay, the next 5 minutes or the next 3 minutes or the next, the next time you're at bat, I want you to focus on this. So I'm not trying to control the entire training session, and I'm not trying to, so let's say that you're in a training session for an hour or an hour and a half, right? If I ask you to focus for an hour and a half, can you do that? No, right?
No.
But, and I'm going to ask you, so this is something that I do constantly with different sports. So I am going to ask you, so whatever it is that you're doing, if you can see me, I want you to sit up. So I want everybody to sit up a little bit. And I want you to pay attention to my hand for 5 seconds. So we're going to start right now. So you're paying attention to my hand for 5 seconds. What did you see?
I saw some rings.
So I turned it from side to side. You saw rings. What else did you notice?
Open and closed your hand.
Open and closed. So there was movement, right? Anything else? So why did I ask you to sit up? I mean, could you see my hand if you're like lying like that? Can you still see my hand? What did you guys just like sitting up a little bit do to you? It actually made you pay attention a little bit more. And if I ask you to do that for 5 seconds, you can do that for 5 seconds. Now, if I ask you, how long is a baseball game? It can be anywhere from, I mean, it could be like a very fast baseball game, could be an hour, but it could last 3.5 hours or 4, right? I mean, it depends on, right? So if I ask you to focus for an hour on my hand, when are you gonna, I mean, you're gonna lose interest like that, because the reality is in baseball, what you need to do is you need to be able to refocus. It's not about focus. So let's say every pitch, okay, you just strike, you just had your first strike. If you are thinking, oh my God, I have to focus, and you start fighting with that, you're gonna end up like kind of like laying back and not focusing right. If you could just let go and say, I'm going to focus on the next pitch, on this next action right here, right now, then you have a lot more control. And that's something that you can train every day. You can train your focus every day. So if you lose your focus, you can say, instead of berating yourself for losing it, just say, how do I get it back? Like, what do I need to focus on? And so do I need to focus on the next pitch? Do I need to focus on this area of my bat or on my shoe? Like, what is it that you need to look at, and what is it that you need to focus on?
That's great. And I think maybe George and Matt can hop in here, but I think like during a bullpen, during a practice bullpen, they might recommend a shorter bullpen because they're able to get more accomplished, because it's not a 45 or 50 pitch bullpen. I don't know, George.
Yeah,
you guys want to hop in and kind of share on some of that?
Yeah, like all over the winter, I mean, we would keep pens to 20 to 25 pitches, because going beyond 35 to 40 for most guys isn't productive. They're not as focused, and it's almost like saying you only have 25 reps or you only have 20 reps. Then they have to increase their focus on each one. Certain guys, though, do need to be stretched out more, and they are like very engaged for 35, 40 pitches. And if that's the case, then I think it's okay. But each guy's different. And typically, I mean, we'll err on the side of the scarcity of reps rather than an abundance.
And I like that, because then you're actually, like, I remember a coach saying, somebody saying like, can I have 5 more? And the coach say, no, because you had 25 and you had to focus on those and you wasted 10 of them. So you don't get 5 more. So it's about, so if you have somebody that's actually, taking advantage of it and can focus for the 40 or for the 35, if it's working, then you do it. But if not, I think you're right, where you just need to make sure that you keep it shorter, but more intense, like where you actually do need to focus and take advantage of everyone that you have, because that's where you're also training that resilience.
Yeah.
I think, and especially in hitting too, I don't know if this is just a general question or not, but you see a lot of hitters that'll ask for like one more,
Just one more.
just one more, because they did something poor. Their performance was poor, so they want to end on a good note. Is that, what are your thoughts on that?
So for me with coaches, it's like that person asking you for one more, did they earn that one more during the training session? If they earned it, absolutely. If they didn't, then it's a no. It's like, no. Like, you actually need to you need to be focused from the beginning.
Yeah.
And so it's actually like, it's almost like, I'm not saying punish, but you want to reward the behaviors that you want rather than punish the ones that you don't. Yeah.
Interesting. So let's say your performance is temporarily down, in a sport like baseball where everything's tracked, you have your hitting velocity, your pitching velocity. If your velocity, say 1 week isn't where it should be, you have expectations of how hard you should be throwing, and you hit that last week, but then this week it's down. What do you do to help someone through that kind of like maybe temporarily lack in performance?
That has a lot to do with the person when, I know that I feel like I'm copping out of all the questions by saying it depends, but it really does
same
depend.
thing in
and you
training.
guys know that, because it's like, it really depends on who you're working with. Right. And so if I have someone who comes in and says, I've had like a really bad training week, I ask where they are in their, in their periodization, let's say, or like where they are in their schedule. Because there's going to be ebbs and flows everywhere, right? And so when do we need to worry about it? I mean, do you have a slower week after you had a very intense week that was really charged and heavy? And so then this week is a little bit slower. Is that to be expected? And I would probably talk to the strength and conditioning coach to see where we're at, and talk to the coaches. If it comes up that it's something where this person is just being too hard on themselves, and you think that it's more of a mental issue, then I would say, okay, let's take a look at what's happening, and asking questions like, how is, all of the things that are around that, are they resting well? Are they sleeping well? Are they recovering the way they need to? Because a lot of times, one of the things that you see is that athletes tend to, get very, very intense, and things are going well, and then they try to do a little bit more. And then the following week, there's like a little bit of a down because your body needs to recover. So I ask questions like that to take out those possibilities. Once I've taken those possibilities out, I start asking, what are you thinking about? And where are your thoughts taking you? And I talk a lot about, is it effective or ineffective? I had a basketball player who had the highest percentage in free throws. She's very, very good with free throws. And I actually asked, what do you think about when you're in the free throw line? And she started laughing. And because she said that it was really dumb what she was thinking about. And I said, would you mind sharing? And she said that what she thought about was that if she didn't make it, her coach would be very, very upset with her. Right. So she actually said, coach will kill me if I don't make it, And I know this coach that she's working with, you know, at a professional level, and it's not like that. And it's not, but she talked about the coach that she had when she was very young, Eastern European coach, and who would say a free throw is completely under your control. It's the one time in basketball when it's completely under your control. Nobody's doing it. So it's all about the way that you know, the movement that you do, right? And so she actually said, you know, like, I know that no coach is going to kill me, but this is, so is that positive or negative? If you just hear the phrase coach will kill me, it's very negative, right?
Yes, yeah.
For me, it was like, I'm not going to change that with her because that's effective for her, because that's like what makes it click for her. And then she doesn't have to think of how her, you know, how she needs to handle the ball or when does she need to release or whatever, because she has like this automated response to, I better make it. Right. And so for me, when I'm thinking about these things, it's what are thoughts that are helping you in your performance, and what are the thoughts that don't help you? And rather than saying positive or negative, it's like recognizing them and then trying to put the ones that help you in the forefront.
Interesting. That's awesome. Especially, I think in the sport of baseball, maybe some other sports too, everyone hears the term YIPs, you know, where like they just, for whatever reason, it's not an injury, they can't throw strikes. You know, they keep hitting batters. You know, catchers can't throw it back to the pitcher. Weird things which might end careers at high levels. We've seen it. You know, maybe George or Matt can speak. I forget some of the professional guys that have had it, but it's a very unique thing. I definitely would like to hear some of your thoughts on that, and you know how you might help someone that goes through that. I know I've had at least one or two people that I've trained that have dealt with that, and it's tough.
It is. It's hard. I mean, and it's not an easy solution. It's not a, oh, just stop thinking that, or if you just, you know, or if I take you back to the basics. It's actually acknowledging the fact that this person is struggling, and then at times it's talking through some of the things that have happened that got you there. Because a lot of times what happens is that your thoughts start just really taking over, and it's like I mean, you say I can't that many times that you actually freeze, and you just, it seems like you just can't throw, or you can't do. Had a basketball player who couldn't, you know, I mean, there's just a way that he could do a free throw. I mean, it just could not do it. And if you stop and make, you know, and I've had golfers and baseball players and softball players who have talked about it, and who have, and I mean, you're talking about very, very high level people who actually say, this is ruining my career, like, or my
Yep.
scholarship possibility, you know, like things like that. And so there is no one easy solution. There is no one answer where you just say, this is what you do and that takes care of it. It's actually really working through it, and having the player say, I really need the help. I really need help. And I know that eventually I will be able to do it, you know, but it's getting them to move from can't to actually acknowledging and being conscious of what's happening in that moment. A lot of times what happens is when you're in a moment where you're uncomfortable, you just want to get out of it. And so when you have when you say, I can't throw, you want to get out of that situation as quickly as possible. And for me, it's like, can we sit in that situation for a little bit? Can you talk about what it feels like? Can you describe it? Can we go through it? And so when they do, it's actually pretty stressful, because it's you feel like there's something wrong with your mind.
Yeah, no, it's a
Yeah.
definitely a real thing. What are this is probably my last question, then we can kind of open it up for everyone. What are some, is there certain words or phrases that you know that you recommend or don't recommend that players use when they're maybe talking to one another, or a coach is talking to a player? You know, what are some maybe positive ones that you would recommend, or maybe some ones that you would probably not recommend?
Um, so I I'm a very, very big believer in feedback, and for me, feedback is always positive. It's not like whether it's positive or negative, it's effective or ineffective. And so it's in the way that you give feedback, right? And so for me, it's when you're giving feedback, are you making sure that you're doing it in a way that actually helps the other person? Or are you doing it to get even? Like you got upset over something and you're just saying something without really thinking about how it's going to benefit the other person, right? I had a coach who talked about this player who messed up a couple of times, and somebody said, "Aren't you going to say anything?" And the coach said, "He knows it already. Like what he needs right now is support. He doesn't need me to come down and beat him up about what just happened, because he's the person that's the most upset over striking out for the third time. Like he's upset enough about it already." So I actually need to find a way to give information that's actually helpful, right? So for me, it's not there. The information that you give needs to be really, really thinking about how can you help the person, and is it something that you're going to help them in that moment, or do you need to give them a little bit of time and then give them the information when they can actually hear it? So when the emotion is a little bit lower, maybe. I generally don't think that telling someone how poor they do something or how bad they are is helpful. I don't think that that's particularly helpful. I think that you need to make sure that when you're giving information, you're focused on the behavior and that it's not the person. That you're not saying you're terrible. You're saying that behavior was not helpful, or what you did is not acceptable. I mean, you can even say that. So I'm not saying you should always say it's good, it's good, it's good. I'm just saying that the way that you approach behaviors is a way that people are going to respond to you.
That's great. Awesome. So yeah, we'll kind of open it up. If anyone has any questions, feel free just to unmute. And let's throw it out there. Sorry, my internet was kind of shoddy there. Not sure if anyone heard me or not, but if anyone has any questions, we can definitely open it up for everyone.
I have a question.
Yep.
So I've been told that the mindset of trying to succeed and doing your best to succeed, and like fueling that by having the mindset of like wanting to prove people wrong, like isn't not right, but there's a better way to go about it.
So for me, it's and I talk about this quite a bit. I say there are some people that you want to prove wrong. If you focus your energy on the people that you want to prove right, so starting with yourself, right? But you know, there are people around you that really believe in you, right? And so do you want to prove those people right, or do you want to prove or do you want to prove the other people wrong? You know, and so it's a little bit of a game of you know, it's a little bit of a mind game, but it's also, what do you want to focus your energy on? And I know that again, there's no right and wrong. I mean, I know athletes who are, and you see, you know, you see Michael Jordan, you know, in this right now with the Last Dance, where they say something like, "Oh yeah, like I'm gonna get you," and he's like, "Oh yeah, well let me show you," you know, and it took that much for him to come and school you the next day, right? And so it really depends on the mindset that you have. If thinking about proving someone wrong puts a lot of pressure on you, it's probably not a good thing. And so that's where you want to focus on proving someone right, you know, somebody that believes in you. If, however, thinking about, you know, I'm gonna prove you wrong gives you that edge and you can focus well on that, then why not? You know, it's, again, there's no, for me, there's no definites in this, because there's no one way of doing it, because we're all so different.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have a question. What are some common applications you'll give to coaches to help implement improving focus or just mental skills into a practice session?
Different applications, as in apps on your phone, or
No. Like how we can how we can just better apply some of these things to improve focus or
right.
things like that.
No, and I'm actually asking you this, and I'm not being, like, I'm not trying to be funny, because there are a couple of things that I actually suggest athletes, especially, in games as in sports as mental as baseball. For me, like Headspace, or like a couple of apps that actually have like meditation. That's there's a couple, like Headspace has meditation that's specific for athletes. And so
Okay.
I like those. So that's why I said, when you said
Okay.
applications,
Yeah.
I was like, okay. I wasn't trying to be funny about it. So for me, it's about when you're planning a training session, when you're planning practice, that you actually think about when you go through. A lot of times coaches go through, okay, what are the technical aspects that I need to be thinking about? What are the basics that I'm trying to teach here, right? And so, from, I don't know in baseball, and I'm not an expert in baseball, but let's say that you're thinking about how they're hitting, or the grip, or how they're, and how they respond to fastballs, or to curveballs, or to, like whatever it is that you're trying to do in that moment, right? And then the try to think about, when you're thinking about those, try to think about the mental component of the game for that. So what would be a mental strength that you could develop in that? So could you develop, focus? Could you develop resiliency? Could you develop mental, like what mental skill do you want to work on? So what is, how they focus on their routine, what their routine looks like. I mean, because if they're going to have a routine, to bat in a game, are they doing that in the training session as well? Because you want to start getting them used to that. And so to actually think about, when you're talking about the technical skill, actually think about the mental skill as well. And I have a couple of things that I can send you guys, that I can share with you, that you can take a look at, for the coaches. Yeah.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Cool. Any other questions? All good? Cool. All right, guys. Well, let's all thank Cristina for coming on today and giving up her time and excellent knowledge and expertise in the sport of sports psych. I know I definitely learned a lot. It was very useful, and I'm sure everyone else did.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Good night.
All right. All right, Cristina.
Bye.
Thank you.
All right.
I'll see
You're
you.
welcome. Bye.
Bye-bye.